Imagine being the President of the United States and not having the tact or sensitivity to properly address the pregnant widow of a soldier who died in service to this country. Good morning. I'm Ed James, and this is Black Almanac. U.S. Army Sergeant David Johnson of Miami Gardens, Florida, died in a deadly ambush in Niger on October 4th. It took the president nearly 2 weeks to reach out to the Johnson's widow, and when he finally did on Tuesday, Trump told her he knew what he was signing up for, but when it happens, it hurts anyway. I'll return with Dr. Lawrence Miller, who joins today's discussion. I'm glad you accepted the invitation to come back after last week.
Well, I tell you, I'm so much in your debt in terms of giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience.
No. I'm in your debt. Our viewers in your debt, because we appreciate you and your insight and your expert analysis.
Oh, thank you.
One of the 4 servicemen who were killed in Niger a couple of weeks ago is from Florida.
Yes.
Miami Gardens, Florida. And one of his mentors growing up was a congresswoman.
Frederica Wilson.
The lady with the hats.
That's right.
Yeah. She was in the vehicle because of her special relationship with that family. When they were on the way to Miami International Airport, and I say Miami, some folk may think Delaware, but the body had already come into Delaware and was being sent for the dignified transferal. That's the exact name of it, as you know.
Yes.
To the family. President Trump decided to call her. And Congressman Wilson was in the car, and her mother, and he had a conversation.
Yes.
Now, it would be too easy to say that he just doesn't respect Gold Star families, going back to the Khans and others.
Yes.
But our director of today, Chris One, says he just has no empathy for anybody.
Exactly. So it would appear in terms of what transpired, if we take a step back as far as this incident is concerned, he was taken to task because as far as the reporting on this is concerned, this is the largest loss of life in the military during his presidency. And he had not called or sent a letter to this family or any other families for days.
And there are 4 different young men killed.
And so being prompted by that, as far as the fake news, as he likes to call it, prompting him that he had not done this, he finally goes ahead and, in a news conference, mind you, they've been saying these things to him about why haven't you called or sent a letter to this family. You're talking about the NFL and all these other different extemporaneous things as far as our society is concerned. But this, where people in the service of our country lost their lives, you haven't called.
In a place where many don't even know exists. Or that we had American soldiers in there.
And what was the purpose of them being there? But be that as it may, he was, in my estimation, embarrassed into taking that step to be able to go ahead and call and speak to these families relative to this situation. And so he gets on the phone and speaks to the widow, And you have to remember, this is a 24-year-old woman who just lost her husband and is pregnant. And he's talking to her, right, making statements like he knew what he was getting into.
On a speakerphone in the car.
A speakerphone in the car.
Right. That Congresswoman Wilson heard and others in the car.
And others in the car heard. And they back up what the Congresswoman, because it's the Congresswoman who initially said something. And then the family backed up what she said as far as the conversation that...
Accuracy.
Yeah, the accuracy of the conversation that Trump had with the widow. And so Trump calls it a fabrication, as if it never happened. Okay? And so here it is, the family is devastated by this call, and instead of saying, oh, if I made a mistake, if I did something wrong, I don't want to go ahead and add to your misery. He doubles down.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But he can't say that.
He can't say that. So here it is, we're dealing with this situation, and that would be bad enough. But then he goes ahead and says that President Obama never called, or I shouldn't say never.
First he said never.
Right.
And then he said, well, maybe sometimes.
Maybe sometimes there's a backing up from that statement, right? And so, and not just President Obama, but that other presidents haven't done this in terms of calling families. So that cascaded into a number of different presidents, from Bush to Clinton to Obama and the rest of them, going ahead and saying that's not true. So we have a problem in terms of the veracity of the word of the President of the United States.
We have continuing problems with the veracity of the word of the President of the United States. That's a nice way of saying he's a liar, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's dangerous. It's dangerous because we trust that the President is going to tell us the truth because he has the authority to put lives on the line in defense of this nation.
In fact, when he was talking to Mrs. Johnson, he didn't know her husband's name. And this was the most damnable thing from my perspective.
Yes.
He knew what he was getting into.
Right.
But I guess when it happens, you still
are hurt by it. The lack of empathy is evident in terms of this individual.
Then he threatens Congresswoman Wilson when the press started saying, well, I didn't say that, I didn't say that.
Right.
And she'd better know what she's talking about.
Right.
Which implies you have a recorded conversation or something that you can prove that she's wrong. When they asked for that, he says, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Then there's the press conference, and Mrs. Huckabee Sanders, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, his press secretary, when she was asked about it, does he have a recording? She says flat out, no. Then they asked him again, when are you going to give us your proof? Let her say it again. Then you'll see what I have.
Yeah. You know.
Well, sure enough, he fired off some other stupidity on Twitter. Mrs. Wilson, Congresswoman Wilson, fired right back. But we still haven't heard.
No. And you're not going to hear because he doesn't have it. It's just a whole lot of, as Vice President Biden used to say, a lot of malarkey.
Yeah.
The thing here is that he also made the accusation that this was being politicized and used his chief of staff, John Kelly, and his son's death in this argument with the press as far as the accusation he made about President Obama.
Now, when his son was, General Kelly's son was first killed, he said, let's not talk about it because my son is more important than the son of a farmer, of a carpenter,
Yes.
And he went on to
Sure.
many vocations, not because he's the son of a general.
Right.
Now, the press knew this,
Right.
that was his attitude when his son was killed. But of course, Donald, who doesn't read and doesn't listen, who tweets
Yes.
all the time, says, well, my general will back it up. And so they asked. He gave you permission to use his son's name, and he was saying to back it up that Obama didn't say anything about
Right.
about
His son dying.
About his son dying. And then Sarah Huckabee, the press secretary, said, well, yeah, he says it's a shame, the general says it's a shame that this would be politicized. Now, I believe he would say something like that. But he also knows it was the president who politicized it.
Yeah, who initiated it? Who initiated it? Who brought his name into the conversation? Who brought President Obama into the conversation along with President Bush and President Clinton? Okay? How do you say that? How do you fix your mouth to go ahead and say that these presidents were AWOL or MIA when it came to people who died in the service of their country based upon the orders that they gave to go ahead and defend the nation in foreign lands? We have untold video footage of President Obama talking to families, Gold Star families, meeting caskets when they come back from these war-torn countries. And he makes a statement like that, as if it's just a throwaway line in terms of, defending himself. And that's the problem that I have with this whole scenario.
The last thing before we move on, defending himself is what he thinks he does best, because we found out that there was a statement drafted for him with the names of all of the soldiers, all of the families, but he never publicly read it. And the reason being is, since this happened on his watch, he was embarrassed.
Well, I just can't imagine the hurt that these families dealing with the loss of a loved one have it compounded by the insensitivity displayed by their commander-in-chief.
Well, let's talk about Trump care. First, he supports it. Then he doesn't support it. They balance the budget. They say they're going to do it. But they're going to balance it on the back of Medicare
Yes.
and Medicaid.
Right.
And what the first thing we see is they're going to take several hundred millions of dollars from Medicare to give to the wealthy.
Yes. This budget that they dealt with on Thursday is only indicative of the fact that they wanted to find the money to be able to go ahead and give a tax break to the wealthy, hoping that it will trickle down to people who, in terms of this country where we are today, having people in record numbers in poverty, and in that poverty being the working poor. That is unconscionable.
Well, we learned about the trickle-down theory a long time ago, because I remember when George H.W. Bush told Ronald Reagan, that's voodoo economics.
Right, exactly.
It was voodoo economics then, and
Voodoo
now. Economics now.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the appointments that our president make. You appoint one today, and another one withdraws.
Yes.
The drug czar.
Yes. This is a classic case of Trumpism as it relates to not doing your homework. Here it is, a congressman who sponsored a bill that went through Congress, sailed through Congress, ended up on the president's desk and was signed into law, that holds harmless the drug companies as far as the epidemic of opioids and their distribution within society.
That was Congressman Tom Marino
Exactly.
from Pennsylvania.
Yes. And the bill was co-sponsored by Marsha Blackburn, a congresswoman in Tennessee, who's now running for Senate.
And Marco Rubio.
And the fact of the matter is that these individuals, all within the bounds of law, tied the hands of the DEA in investigating the real genesis of this problem. And for example, Florida had big problems and still does have big problems with the issue of drugs, both legal and illegal. The situation is such that the DEA could see that as far as these drug mills, talking about pain clinics, would give, in a town that had 500 or 600 residents, enough pills for 10,000 people.
I know the town that you're talking about, that county. The county was a small county, and they found that it was 400 and some residents, and they got over 4,000 pain pills.
Exactly.
Now, something's wrong with that.
I've never been a math expert, but I can't understand how you need all those pills for that small amount of people. So here it is, right? Instead of them being diligent in terms of talking about the drug companies now saying this doesn't add up, right? They go ahead and do this, and the DEA wants to take them to task for it, and this legislation goes ahead and ties the hands of the DEA. Now, let's get back to Trump. Trump puts this guy up, Tom Marino, as his drug czar, right, with something that he should have known, because the Washington Post did an investigation, and it was on 60 Minutes not too long ago, about the fruits of this investigation. This didn't just happen yesterday.
No. And Marino withdrew the day after, on the Monday, after 60 Minutes came out on the Sunday.
Exactly. So
he wasn't ready for that whipping.
No, he wasn't. No. And the thing here is that Trump should, or his administration should have done a background check on this individual so that they know when they put somebody up that this type of thing wouldn't be front and center as far as him becoming a drug czar, when this legislation was sponsored by him and Marsha Blackburn.
Who expects to take Croker's place.
Exactly.
In Tennessee, as the new senator from Tennessee. We should not allow that to happen without further discussion.
Exactly.
Well, you know, kneeling. The NFL decided that since Mr. Trump spends all his time telling the NFL how they should discipline their players, because being as foul-mouthed as he is,
yes.
So they had a meeting. And at that meeting, there are several owners, several player reps, and several players. And then after the meeting, they decided that NFL players contribute an awful lot to the communities in which they work and live in. They've always done that. And they have, you don't lose your First Amendment rights because you become an athlete.
Exactly. But the other part of this is, in conjunction with what you just got through saying, is the catalyst of it. Colin Kaepernick, he, in terms of first sitting and then taking a knee after being spoken to by an Army veteran, okay, to make sure that people understood that this is not about disrespecting the military, disrespecting the flag or the anthem. This is about police brutality and court reform. So here it is, he can't get a job in the NFL, but he still gives his money to community-based organizations dealing with these issues. Very committed to what he believes in, okay? You know, they say, blessed are the people who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for they shall know the kingdom of heaven. Here it is, this individual stepped forward, was persecuted because of it, in terms of the righteousness of his cause. The righteousness of, you know, there are people who are unjustly imprisoned, right? There was a recent case in Kansas where a person spent over a decade in jail, came out, the state of Kansas said, no, we're not going to give you any money, even though you were falsely imprisoned for over a decade. How do these people get redress? The other issue, bail reform. Here it is, you get convicted, you're not convicted, but you get charged with a crime. You can't get out of jail until you come up with bail. So here it is, your bail is maybe $200,000, or let's just say it's $50,000. Okay.
And we're not supposed to have vendetta prisons anymore.
Right, exactly. So here it is, you got to come up with at least $5,000, which you won't get back, to be able to get out of prison. And a lot of defendants can't come up with that. These are the type of things these players are talking about.
I don't think we should end this program without talking about George W. Bush.
Yes.
This past Thursday, he spoke at the Bush Institute, and you said you have something that you want to share with us.
Yes, I wanted to share the fact that he said that bigotry seems emboldened in the modern United States. He warned that America needs to accept globalization and reject white supremacy. This is coming from a Republican former president of the United States in reaction to some of the things that the current president has been saying and doing. And it's not only him. Senator McCain previously said some things about where we are along the same lines as far as, especially as it relates to white supremacy, emboldening bigots in this country. This has to be something that people need to stand up and say that they are rejecting out of hand from not only the positions that the president has taken, especially when you think about Charlottesville, but also his chief strategist, Steve Bannon. So here we are. Hopefully this is a snowballing effect in terms of what President Bush had to say that address this issue that we're dealing with, especially as far as bigotry, prejudice, and hatred in the United States is concerned.
He says it's blasphemy and against the creed. Well, Dr. Miller, time has come again.
Happens so quickly sometimes.
Yes, it does. Stay with us. I'll be back with some final thoughts after this.
The Bradenton, Sarasota chapter of the Lynx presents The Cumulative Effects of Racism on People of African Descent, Tuesday, November 7th from 5 to 7 p.m. at the North Sarasota Library, 2801 Newtown Boulevard. To RSVP, call Shirley Miller at 941-355-2502. And The Politics of Survival, a series on voting and your ability to impact your future. A candidate forum for Florida House Seat 72. It's a Democratic primary. Candidates Margaret Good and Ruta Giuliani. Thursday, October 26th at the Robert L. Taylor Community Center at 1845 John River Street from 6 p.m. to 7:30.
Many of us applauded Gandhi. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Some even teach that philosophy to their children, yet ridicule former San Francisco 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick for his silent protest of what he sees as unpunished racism by too many law enforcement officers. His protest is not the first by black athletes. In fact, 49 years ago, during the Summer Olympics of 1968 in Mexico City, U.S. athlete Tommy Smith won the gold in the 200-meter race with a world record time of 19.83 seconds. Australian Peter Norman took the silver, and U.S. athlete John Carlos won bronze. At the completion of the race, the three went on to the podium for their medals. The two U.S. athletes received their medals shoeless, but wearing black socks to represent black poverty. Smith wore a black scarf around his neck to represent black pride. Carlos had his tracksuit top unzippered to show solidarity with all blue-collar workers in the U.S., and a necklace of beads, which he describes were for those individuals that were lynched or killed and that no one said a prayer for, that were hung and tarred. It was for those thrown off the sides of boats during the Middle Passage. All three athletes were Olympic Project for Human Rights badges after Norman, a critic of Australia's former white Australian policy, experienced empathy with their ideas. Both U.S. athletes intended to bring black gloves to the event, but Carlos forgot his, leaving the Olympic Village. It was Peter Norman who suggested Carlos wear Smith's left-hand glove. For this reason, Carlos raised his left hand as opposed to his right. While the Star Spangled Banner played, Smith and Carlos delivered the salute with heads bowed. On October 16, 1960, their gesture became front-page news around the world, and we all are proud of being black. Black Americans understand what we did tonight. Tommy Smith said in later life that they were concerned about the black assistant coaches, or the lack of, about how Muhammad Ali got stripped of his title, and the lack of access to good housing, and our kids not being able to attend top colleges. Colin Kaepernick understood. Why can't you? For those of us being born black, we will be black until the day we die. For Black Almanac, I'm Ed James, and that's my final word. Have a wonderful day, Suncoast.
Credit card debt can ruin your life. If you owe $10,000 and minimum payments are siphoning away your paycheck each month, you can get debt-free in less time than you think.
I've paid $800 a month for the past 3 years and haven't changed the balance on my credit card.
Get debt-free now has a program to reduce your debt, stop the harassing phone calls, avoid financial ruin, and settle for less than you owe.
I feel like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
You're pre-approved for our special hardship program if you owe $10,000 or more. Upon payment of your new lower balance, your debt will finally shrink until you are debt-free.
My family no longer has 30 years of payments ahead of us at 20% interest.
There's no fees until you see results. So call now, make one monthly program payment, and free up your cash. Resolve your debt.
Call 800-628-1251, 800-628-1251.